as well, so it's not all this permanent stuff in the ground right away. The baskets there, they would be super easy to move if we found that one was, concerned to you guys. That's easier to move than a tee pad would definitely be. So our plan is just to install the baskets first, let people play the course, just have temporary signage up, almost like, like a for sale sign in the ground, something like that, that had what hole it was, the par, the footage, and things like that at first.
Is the sponsorship you're talking about, and what I'm looking at here is a basket. Are you talking about sponsorships that would be either the flag or the casing around the top of the basket?
I couldn't print off a good picture of what it is. So we actually took one when we were playing this past weekend that Ben will walk around and show you guys. But that's probably exactly what it's going to look like. Certainly that's when the course is a little more permanent, but for now it would probably be probably just the size of like just a normal piece of paper, and it would just be temporarily placed in the ground until we had something a little more permanent as well.
Okay, just to clarify for anybody else who's wondering, they're saying the sponsorships would be on a placard at the tee?
At the tee, yes.
Gotcha. So in that one, they're showing us basically an ad for like Turkey Hill.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would exactly what we envision it would look like when the course is actually more established and permanent things are in place and so on.
So I have, correct me if I'm wrong, I have two quotes here. The first is for the cost of the discs. I'm sorry, the disc catchers.
Yes.
And the second is for the turf, right?
The second one is for 18 baskets and 18 tee pads. The first price on there from Innova is just another quote that I got for just 18 baskets. That company does not do tee pads. Only the Prodigy company does. Yes, and the turf sample that I passed around, that is from Prodigy.
So the quote from Prodigy has both, that cost is all inclusive for tees, the turf for the tees and for the baskets.
Yes, and right back, the next page from that quote from Prodigy, it would be the T2 basket is what we're looking at installing. And I know it shows like a little stand there. That stand would not be there. It would just be like a pole that goes in the ground.
The green one, the yellow one, or the blue one? Which?
The green one.
Green one.
It'd be the green one.
Have you all talked to the rec board?
Yes, we actually walked this course out with Greg here.
Mr. Mayon, Chair of the Rec Board, is here to speak on behalf of this plan, if you would like to hear from him.
I would, if you don't mind. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That'd be great.
Good evening. Thank you for the time. My name is Greg Mayon. I'm the chair of the Township's Recreation and Parks Board. And Josh and Ben have been in to see us on 2 occasions, made their presentation to us. After that time, I joined them out at the park and we walked the entire layout. We were sensitive to some of the comments we had heard through Mr. Renault. We moved a couple of the holes as they originally had proposed in one of their first iterations of the course. And I can say that for our board, we fully support the concept of the build-out of a disc golf course. Lower Allen Township Community Park is a fabulous destination park. Great number of amenities already. We think this adds to that. And having walked the course with Ben and Josh, or at least sort of the rough design of what the course would be, I don't find it to be overly invasive. One version of these types of courses has concrete pads, maybe as big as this table, to allow the person throwing the disc to get a good running start and make their heave. That we found was a little out of character with the park. Potentially could be a safety hazard for people who are using it for other types of passive recreations. I think the mats are a great idea. The idea that the mats can be made more flush with the ground and not on top of the ground, I think is a nice feature. And where we plotted the baskets, we were very mindful that they're not in an open area, that they're not too close to any other amenity in the park. You saw a picture of the basket. I think they're a few feet high. They're maybe about so big. You'll see them. They'll be noticeable, but they're not going to be in the middle of any of the other amenities or the pavilions or any of the fields that are there. So, you know, I think it's wise that we spend some time to continue talking about exactly where the layout would be, what the impacts would be if there are any on the park. But, you know, having walked it with these guys, I feel a lot better about the potential. And again, you know, our board strongly supports conceptually the addition of this amenity to Lower Island Community Park.
Thank you. When Josh, right? Yes, when Josh first came in several months ago, I had brought up the idea of this being more of a family, you know, being friendly, more friendly maybe to families. I had an experience with disc golf that just wasn't. I mean, it was just the holes were just too far, and there were trees to go over and things like that. And I'm wondering, do you feel that when you walked it that, you know, we would get some families that would be interested in playing this, or just going to be purely an avid disc golf player attraction?
Well, that's an interesting and yet very fair question. And this can really be designed to any degree that folks decide is appropriate. I think these guys would be able to tell you what might be traditional length holes, but it's a great point in that, I don't like admitting it on the record, but it does take a lot to throw those discs and get them to the basket. And, you know, someone who's a little more accomplished might have an easier time with it. I went DNF that day, which did not finish all 18 holes. But one of the other parts of it is that, you know, if a tee box is here and the basket is 100 yards, 200 yards, however far away it is, the reality is, and it may not be the case if you have an actual starting point that's marked with a mat and a sign with the distance and the hole number and the par, but there's no reason why you can't start halfway closer based on your skill set. Now, it's fair, maybe if a family's out there, they might not think that or know that, but the reality is there might be folks at their level who play in tournaments and play at a variety of disc courses around the area, but there's no reason anybody else can't go out there with even a Frisbee out of your garage, although these are discs, just so you know they're not Frisbees. They made that very clear to me, but you really could. The rules aren't that firm where somebody can't just go out and have a good time, particularly in a park setting.
And I understand that, thank you. And it's not, for me, it's not a deal breaker, but I wanted to just bring it back up. And I would imagine, being Lower Allen Park, that it will attract families to grab a Frisbee from their garage or two and bring their family or kids out and want to play some version of that. So typically, are the disc golf players that really go out to play, are they pretty flexible when other people are on the course playing around?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, especially in our case, we always play around people, and a lot of people actually carry extra discs and hand them out to families or anybody that questions, you know, what are you doing out here? What is this sport? So
What is the cost to play a game of that?
it's free.
Oh, it's free
All you would have to do is buy the discs.
to buy the disc.
Buy the discs, or like Greg said, you can just grab anything you have from here.
And where do you buy the disc?
Dick's, there's Funtastic. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, but they carry a large amount of discs. Played Against Sports in Lancaster, they sell a whole bunch. There's a store down in York.
Is
they
this
sell
something
some.
that they could buy at the park?
Potentially, there's some parks that have a small vendor there, but that's actually pretty uncommon to actually have a vendor like on site, unless it draws in a large amount of people that would be necessary.
We wouldn't have anybody out there to.
I was gonna say, we're not
selling.
going to be
I mean,
selling
We don't
them.
have a sales counter out there.
So, I just want to circle back to cost for a moment. Basically, and I'm looking at the quote that includes the Prodigy quote, because that includes both the baskets and the tees, correct? Correct. Okay, so that's $81.95 all inclusive for materials. Does anyone, staff, have any idea of what labor cost would be for us to install?
One of our ideas would be, there was actually a local club down in York that said they would be willing to help out. So that would, it'd kind of almost be free labor. I mean, even if Ben and I were just to go out there and do it. Or the Boys, another good point was that the Boy Scouts could help out as well too. It's similar projects.
So I'm just trying to get a ballpark for myself. So, and you said you would be selling tee hole sponsorships for $500 is your idea for all 18 holes?
Yes.
Okay, so that's $9,000 between the materials and the labor. It pretty much pays for itself. Is your idea?
Yep.
Awesome. And now, lastly, I apologize. I'm new to the board. I was in the audience the first time you guys were here. Do you happen to have a updated layout for us? I didn't see it in the package.
Yeah, I wasn't actually able to print that off.
It's all right.
I can pull it up on my phone and pass my phone around if that's something you'd like to see.
Is it something you could send to staff to have us?
Yes, I could certainly
Yeah,
email that.
that'd be
yes.
great, just before moving forward, because I haven't seen, well, an old layout except for up on the screen, so I would love the new layout before we put a stamp on this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you guys for your coming back and coming to us. It's a neat idea, and I appreciate all the work you guys are doing on it.
Thank you.
So you don't plan to go forward until you have enough sponsors to pay for the whole shooting match?
Yeah, pretty much so. If we can only get enough money to put the baskets in, like we'd almost do it in like phases where we would just pay for the baskets and have like temporary signage up until, maybe like next year we ask for more sponsors to raise enough money to actually afford the baskets, or ask some of the township to cover the cost of the material.
I would not be interested in this at all if it turned out to look like it was something, a few guys got together and slapped up there.
Right, and
So-
that's something we don't want either.
Well, and I don't mean, I'm not to be, trying to be condescending. I'm just saying we got to be careful that we're going to do this in stages, then have the money before you start, because I know there's nothing in the budget for this.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for these gentlemen?
Josh, the goals would be permanently installed, correct?
Yes, but there actually aren't too difficult. If you look in the packet, there is actually like installation instructions on it. So if a basket was in the way or nobody didn't like it, you would just have to dig it up and then fill the hole with dirt, and then yes. No, if you look a little closer at the picture, it should show a spot where there's actually a padlock. So you can actually, you dig your hole, you pour your concrete with the sleeve in it, and then once that dries, you drop your basket into that, and then you can lock it on your own. So locks are just for honest men, so you technically could steal it if you went out there with like a grinder or something, but it's a little more harder than that too.
And then on the key box, am I correct in assuming that it is a curved structure of treated timber?
Yes, and that the only reason why you would have to actually do that is so that the T-pads would have the warranty. If they're installed incorrectly, then the warranty would not be recognized.
And then the interior underlayment,
Yes. The pad goes over top of that, correct? Yes. I think you just staple it down to the frame of the wood, so it doesn't blow away, or somebody goes to tee off or something, they don't drag their foot or something and it comes up at all. So you would definitely anchor it around the edges. Let me show the picture. He's talking about the T-pad picture. I think the T-pad would be there. I'm not really. Yeah, so like, I think I said it earlier, but the picture, oh, no, just wherever, just the landscape would be, kind of, that's just what they have there, like nice mode, like if you're staring at like a golf green, how there's the green and the rough, it's just whatever the landscape is. It doesn't have to be that technical.
Other than appearance, there's no need, you're not going to lose the disc
Exactly,
in the
no,
rough.
other than appearance, yep.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Josh.
Yep.
Any other questions? Mr. Manager, can you just give us some guidance as to where we would go from here?
Well, I think, so that the gentleman, let's say, a worst-case scenario, the board knows right now that you don't want to do this. That kind of guidance would be important so they don't go out and waste a whole lot of their time soliciting sponsors. So if you're interested in it enough to tell them, we can go forward. But there's a couple things that you're inherently agreeing to. Number one is the T-pads, the turf boxes scattered throughout the park, the baskets being put in, and the sponsor signs. So if you're in agreement, if you're okay with all those, and you like the idea of having this course in our park, certainly you can ask them to go ahead and give them like sort of the qualified okay, and then they can send me of course, we're not asking you to bless it now. I think, if I understood Commissioner Kutz, he would like to see the layout before any action is taken. So I think that's the next step, is they can send me the layout. I can either print it out for you or put it electronically so you can see it, and we can go over that. If it's necessary, they can come back to another meeting and answer questions about the layout. I've seen it. Mr. Mayon, again, has walked it and seen it. I think we're satisfied. There's a couple of places where it may cross the drive, but we don't view that as a problem because, number one, the drives are not heavily traveled. Number two, you can see the cars coming, so you can hold up and wait until they pass. The one place where it crossed the drive fairly close to Lisburn Road, we asked them to move the goal back on this side so it did not cross the road. So I think we're pretty satisfied with the layout, but of course we want the commissioners to be satisfied with the layout too. So I would suggest that you wait, you get a copy of that, and you view that and ask your questions before, giving any kind of final approval to this plan.
I did have.
I think that's good, Tom. When you send them to us, would you send them to the Parks Maintenance crew also at Public Works?
You mean the layout? Okay, sure.
I have seen these in parks over the years, so I'm not totally unfamiliar. But what I have seen is not the year or two that they put it up, but many years after it's been there, and the chains and the what are they called, the catchers themselves, cages start to look really dog-eared and crummy. That's my own, we don't want to put anything out there. So I guess it'd be up to, are you saying it'd be up to our staff to keep these things in shape? Is that your understanding, Mr. Manager?
Well, we hadn't really talked about the ongoing maintenance, but, it could cost us additional monies downstream unless we could keep a relationship with the sponsors.
I just think, again, as soon as you put something in the ground, as soon as you buy a new car, it begins to get old. And if you don't keep it away, the whole story. So I'm concerned about the upkeep, and I'm not sure it's a deal breaker for me, but I think it's something we should stay in touch with.
The sponsorships would probably change yearly, so if there was a basket that maybe one of you guys thought was, ugly to the park, the new sponsorship could technically pay for, to have that basket
Okay, that
changed.
sounds good.
Also, the more people that get out and play, the more like the chains get rattled, the less that they actually get rusty.
Oh, that's interesting. I know if I were to try to play that, I'd be rattled.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's like Pincho, their course, it's been around for a long time, and their baskets by no means look,
Oh,
because
good.
people get out there and play all the time.
Good.
So,
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we're going to move on.
I-
Yep, go ahead,
Just one-
Commissioner Cutts, yes.
One quick thing, and to your point, Pincho's baskets still look great every time I'm down there. And I think with certainly the original cost, with you guys helping raise some money for it with sponsorships, I think that's a different ballgame that we're talking about. Because if we're being asked with no help from that, you know, we gotta weigh several things come budget time. But I think that certainly helps, especially if we're gonna renew sponsorships eventually. So I like that. I do have one question for the assistant solicitor, and I apologize, Vicky, to throw you on the spot here, pinch hitting for Steve. What kind of liability is the township exposed to if, let's say, someone throws a disc and they don't see a car coming in the drive and it goes through a window and it hits someone and they have damages? Are we going to be liable at all? Is there a way to shield us from liability as well?
I honestly don't know the answer to that.
warning signs.
I think you'd have to have some warning signs, play at your own risk, but the activities a sanctioned township activity on township property, that would be the same as anybody else getting injured or something on your property. So you could have potential liability.
There's,
But-
the Municipal Tort Claims Liability Act would, I guess, kind of shelter us from liability unless there was a defect that we were aware of.
Yeah.
And-
So it's all going to come down to the layout of the course.
Right, and I guess the argument would be then, or is a defect of the layout, the fact that it crosses the drive, a defect that we're aware of, and really that's only for a jury to decide. So I guess, Mr. Manager, my request would be is if either Vicky or Steve, whomever is able to, could give us some guidance as to our liability moving forward. And if that means we have to keep a hole from crossing the drive or whatnot, so be it. But I think my torts professor would be remiss if I didn't bring that question up, so appreciate it.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think it would be difficult to have anybody signing waivers or anything because nobody's going to be out there monitoring. So it's going to be the course design that's going to have to protect you.
So there we go. You're going to submit layout, and we'll just take it from there.
Okay.
Thanks again for all your work on this.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Next on our agenda tonight is number 5, and this is where audience participation is welcomed on any item on the agenda. And if you'd like to speak about or comment on any item that's going to be on our agenda, let us know now and what that item is, and then when that item comes up, we'll have you come up and talk about it. Yes.
Possibly 8 under Township engineer. Item number A,
8A?
8A, 8B, and 8C.
Name?
Jennifer, last name is Booker.
Jennifer Cooper.
Melissa? Name, please?
MCNEAL, and the same as
Yes, sir.
George Laporte, I don't have a sheet in front of me, but I'd like to talk about the sheets.
George Laporte, 8A. Yes, sir. Your name, sir? Gordon Kaufman, 8A. Yes, ma'am. Betsy Metz, item 8 as well. Is that it? Okay. We'll have a busy item number 8. Next is under the President, 6A. I'm looking for a motion to approve the check register of February 14th, 2020 in the amount of $932,000, $932,886.91.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. B, under your president, under number 6, is a motion to approve the department reports for the month of January for community development, fleet maintenance, township engineer, public works, and public safety.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next on our agenda is any business pertinent to the township can be discussed now. And our discussions will be limited to 15 minutes. And what you'll do if you'd like to come up and talk about something that's not necessarily on the agenda, you come up to the podium, give your name, address, and speak into the microphone. Is there anybody that would like to talk about any business of the township right now, other than what we've just discussed? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the township engineer.
First item on the list this evening is SLD docket 2019-11. It's a land development plan for sheets at 1508 Cedar Cliff Drive. Just for orientation purposes, you see I-83, Carlisle Road, the Cedar Cliff High School, and these are the two subject properties right here, currently identified as 1500 and 1510 Cedar Cliff Drive. 1500, the corner property, is currently a gas station. It's about 3/4 of an acre with a 2,700 square foot building, and the property next to it is about 2 acres with a bank building that's currently vacant. So the plan is to combine those two lots together, remove those two buildings, and construct a new building, 4,913 square feet. And I'll touch briefly on a few items, and then there are several people here from Sheets design team that can give you a little more detail on it. So that's the existing conditions there. The way the plan is oriented, Cedar Cliff Drive along the bottom, Carlisle Road along the left side, and the ramp to I-83 South here, existing gas station and bank. This illustrates that there's a small piece of the property, this triangle here, it's actually in the borough of New Cumberland. And because of that, borough will have to either give some sort of approval on the plan or a waiver of their right to review the plan. And we'll need that documentation in order to have the plan recorded at the county. They will look for that. So this is the general layout plan. You can see two parcels combined together with the store in the middle. 6 gas pump locations under a canopy in the front. The main full access drive is on this portion of the property down here. The secondary drive here is right in, right out only. And there's an island to try to prevent anybody from making a left in or out of that driveway. There is a drive-through, the lane that comes around the perimeter here for ordering, and then to the pickup window in the rear. There's parking along the building and on the perimeter of the parking lot. Other items on the site, to address the stormwater management, there are 2 bioretention areas proposed, one on either side of the pavement area. They would be to collect the stormwater and treat it before it is discharged. And there's some infiltration involved as well. Let's see. The access and the traffic has been, is of course always of concern on a project like this. Applicant's engineer has prepared a detailed traffic impact study. I'll go over just briefly the overall concept plan, and then if there's any particular questions on it, he could answer that. The improvements shown here in the immediate vicinity, you can see there's new sidewalk along the front of the building. It's offset a little bit from where the current is. So they're proposing the continental or piano key type crosswalks across the driveways. There's currently a mid-block crosswalk in about this location on Cedar Cliff Drive. The proposal is to move that slightly to the south so that it is on the other side of the new driveway to the Sheetz store. There are currently 4 crosswalks, all directions at the signalized intersection. In conjunction with upgrading some of the pedestrian features on the traffic signal, the crosswalks would all be upgraded there. And across the ramps to 83 southbound entrance. Sidewalks and ramps are currently there. The crosswalks would be upgraded to this style of pavement marking. They actually looked at the off-site, some more off-site improvements on the other side of 83. The 2 traffic signals are coordinated together, and this shows upgrading all the crosswalks at that intersection as well. I will say that anything that is affecting the traffic signals themselves, the signal equipment will require approval by PennDOT because the traffic signal permits will have to be updated, and that is PennDOT's purview there. And because this signal is in New Cumberland, again, that would require the Borough of New Cumberland to be a party to the application to PennDOT to revise their traffic signal as well. And then the third sheet shows a little further down on Cedar Cliff Drive, another off-site improvement that they've agreed to is down at the intersection at Allendale Way. There are 2 existing crosswalks there, and the ramps are there. They would upgrade the pavement markings to the Continental-style crosswalks there as well. I will note one additional item that came up really towards the end of the review and the discussion. You do see there's a lot of upgrades to the signs here as well that would take place along here. One thing that was not on this plan that they did agree to include in the signal modifications is for the right turn traffic coming up Cedar Cliff Drive. There was some concern because a right turn on red is permitted. And there are certain times of the day, particularly in the morning rush, where there may be a lot of traffic doing that to get to the 83 interchange and could create some conflicts with pedestrians trying to cross there if there's a lot of traffic making a right turn on red. To just prohibit the turn at all times would really be detrimental to the traffic operation. And it's really not necessary at all times. So what's going to be part of the proposal to PennDOT is to install a blank out no turn on red sign at that intersection. It's a sign that it's electronic and it's black, and it only comes on no turn on red when the pedestrian push button is activated. So there'd be no turn on red when pedestrians are there. So that's, there are listed on your agenda, you see there were 3 requested waivers for the preliminary plan, the requirement that prohibits driveways from crossing the street right-of-way within 5 feet of a drainage inlet. Well, in this case, the drainage inlets are already in location in the street. And the driveways, although they're new, they're located to optimize the traffic operation, not necessarily the drainage. But that would not be detrimental. And then the third one is the requirement to collect stormwater runoff in planting islands. They are obviously collecting it in the bioretention areas, which is the downstream side, but the planting islands themselves, because of the elevations and the flow, would not be collecting stormwater. With that, I don't know if anybody from the Sheetz team wants to make any more explanation on the project, or if you just want to have questions.
Yeah, that pretty much sums up our presentation there. But what I thought I would do is just kind of take a step back. Believe it or not, my name's Charlie Courtney. I'm with McNeese, Wallace, and Merrick. I didn't mean believe it or not, I'm Charlie Courtney, but let me just, I'm Charlie Courtney. So with me tonight are Bob Franks and Dave Smith with Sheetz, and Adam Davis, who's with BL Companies, the project engineer, and Eric Mounts with traffic planning and design. So believe it or not, we started this process last July. And I'm sure you're all aware, after we submitted applications. There were concerns that were raised by residents in nearby neighborhoods, pedestrian traffic, traffic in general, lighting, lots of different concerns. So Sheets began an outreach effort soon after that. That effort culminated in an open house that I know some of you attended in September at the high school. Following that, there were some additional discussions between representatives of Sheets and representatives of some of the neighbors. And ultimately, we worked through a list of conditions or stipulated conditions, and those were actually imposed as a condition of the grant of 2 variances that your zoning hearing board approved for the project. One variance related to the 4,000 square foot use limitation in the neighborhood commercial district, and the other variance related to the number of fueling positions that you're allowed to have. And all the plans that you see, of course, reflect all of those conditions. Just by way of explanation, I'm not going to read those conditions, and I'm sure you've seen them. But they were a limitation in terms of the overall gross floor area of the store. It was reduced from about 6,000 and change to just under 5,000 square feet. It was some requirements relating to doing an updated pedestrian analysis and counts in the traffic study, and that's been done. There were some standards imposed for exterior lighting to reduce the impact of that lighting. There were standards, or there are standards for exterior speakers. There were some requirements for extending some shrubs and screening along the southern portion of the site out towards Cedar Cliff Drive. There were limitations on terms of the timing of fuel and merchandise deliveries so that those deliveries weren't being made in peak traffic hours, morning and afternoon. There was a requirement or an offer of a contribution of $10,000 for some pedestrian sidewalks. There was a limitation on the highway logo signs, not pursuing those logo signs that you see on 83 and 581. And then a standard for utilizing kind of a lower profile canopy. So you're all familiar with the Sheets canopies. Red, they're backlit, they're kind of deep. And so what would be proposed here, and if you want to see it, we brought a rendering, although we'd have to pull it up. It's just a lower profile canopy. It's not as deep, it's not backlit, so it just has less of an impact. So those are all things that were incorporated in the variance decision. They're being carried through on all the appropriate plans as we move through the process, and they're pretty much being taken care of. So I don't want to rehash everything that Dan did. You know, Dan walked through everything, and I know you don't want to hear us rehash it. So you know the plans. You know, probably we spent probably most of the time on this project kind of figuring out what the right pedestrian improvements were. And a lot of time was spent on that. And I think what you have before you is kind of is a well thought out plan. Now I know there's some variables in terms of what the West Shore School District's going to do, right? And maybe there's some uncertainty. Are they going to continue to have the walking train, or are they not going to have it? What Sheets has agreed to do, there was, as one of those conditions that I mentioned, was a $10,000 contribution if the township wanted sidewalks to be widened. Well, I think it's been determined that that widening probably doesn't make any sense, but what Sheets is willing to do, and we would incorporate that in the financial security agreement that would be provided to the township, is to pay that $10,000 no matter what. We'll make that as a $10,000 contribution to the township, and then that can be used for whatever pedestrian improvements in the future may be deemed necessary based on what West Shore School District does or doesn't do. And maybe you don't need anything, that's fine, we're still going to pay the $10,000. It'll be there. in case something comes up. So with that, we've got our whole team here. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. I think I'm just going to open up to the commissioners at this point. I mean, who would like to go first? Because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions.
I have a question for you. I've been hit every which way from Sunday. The people would like to know, are you guys going to offer the people in that store that they're taking away down there, which has nothing to do with Sheets, are you going to offer them jobs at Sheets?
Bob, come on up. This is Bob Franks with Sheets.
They would have the opportunity to apply for the job.
I've offered them that explanation.
Yeah, but I
But has
don't think-
anybody gone into them and said, why don't you people apply at Sheets? Has anybody gone in and said that to them?
not to my knowledge, no.
Wouldn't it be nice?
We can accommodate that. Like I said, we can't guarantee jobs, but.
I understand that, but wouldn't it be nice? My daughter works for Sheets. That's what I said. Wouldn't it be nice? Thank you.
Is that it? Commissioner Holtzman? No. Next? Anybody? Thomas?
Just a couple questions. I've noticed in various iterations of design, a couple of changes, and again, I appreciate had some feedback from residents and apologize, my mic's not on. Couple of questions on, a couple of iterations, I've seen some changes and appreciate the feedback I've had meeting with some residents, and a couple of people have brought to my attention a couple of changes, and I'm just curious, the handicap spaces, obviously the number has reduced in total handicap spaces. Is that just a pure result of the store size being reduced as well?
Yeah, it is, because the number of spaces that are required is kind of a function of the store size.
Sure. And are all of the handicap spaces going to be van accessible?
Is that Adam? This is Adam Davis with BL.
They can show the plan. I don't know if all of them are van accessible. To meet ADA requirements, a certain percentage has to be van accessible. So those ones right there would be the van accessible. So they have the 8-foot aisle versus the 5-foot aisle, which would be right there.
And that's what ADA requires?
Yeah. Yep. The 8-foot aisle, striped aisle.
Now moving on, you have the drive-through circles around the back of the building, and this, my understanding, is two-way traffic behind the building.
Yes.
Are you concerned at all about accidents happening here? And do you have any idea if maybe a mirror might be in place here so that vehicles exiting the drive-through can see traffic coming through this way? Or is that a concern that you foresee?
What's that site distance?
You're talking about someone driving along here and then pulling out as someone's pulling out of the drive-through?
Exactly.
Yeah. I think if if this car sees this guy coming forward, hopefully they have the insight to stop or slow down. We could potentially put a stop bar but you have to remember there's cars coming this way, so technically they should be on that side of the access.
Now, are there other stores in which, behind the drive-through there, is that, in most of your stores, is that also going to be two-way traffic, or are there some stores where there's a one-way and a do-not-enter sign there?
We have both. So typically, we try to get two-way traffic. If the property, we have constraints on the size of the property. We do have a handful that are one-way back there.
And it's your determination that the two-way design is in the best interest for this particular design?
Yes. No. There's a stop bar as you exit the, so here as you come out of the drive-through lane, there's a stop bar. And we could certainly put some kind of, you know, signage here alerting these folks, you know, to make sure they're aware. But we, in the stores that we have this design, we have not had any issues, so, and we prefer to, let me see your point again. We prefer to have a situation, if these folks, you know, back out and start this direction, we don't want them to be in a situation where they start to back out, realize they can't go, and then you've got kind of a cluster there.
Right.
So that's why we try to have the two-way traffic there and through the rear.
It also provides for emergency vehicles, full access.
Are most of your stores equipped with a drive-up? Most of your stores have drive-up?
Not most of them, only because a lot of our older stores have not.
I'm familiar with your Hampton Township, across from Windsor Park Shopping Center, corner of Wesley Drive and Simpson Ferry, thank you. Is there, I don't believe I've seen a drive-through there, am I right?
I don't think so. There's.
Okay, yeah, I didn't, okay.
There is one at Hereford Road. is the
Yeah,
one down
Hereford
here,
Road.
Which is the one we've been.
Yeah, and they have the same.
Sure. Is the Hereford Road design, if you happen to know offhand, very similar to the layout here?
Yes, very similar.
With the exception that that has 2 points of egress from the sheets, and this is just going to have 1.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then Hereford Road's building just is a little larger as well. I mean,
Okay. Now, moving to pedestrian concerns, I notice you have crosswalks going up to the right to the edge of the property. Is there a plan at some point after you know which way people are walking there to include some sort of markings to guide? So my thought is students are coming at 3 o'clock after school. They're going to be coming right to the crosswalk, but then they're going to be walking, you know, through the gas pumps. And my thought is, do you have a plan to guide them from the sidewalk all the way safely to the store?
Oh, internally?
Yes.
Okay.
So, good evening, Eric Mounds with Traffic Planning and Design. We have had discussions with Township Engineer that once the typical pedestrian patterns are established and we figure out where pedestrians are going to and from the store, that we would work with the township to provide crosswalks from the areas where they would be accessing off of Cedar Cliff Drive into the store. For example, similar store we just wrapped up down in Lancaster County had a similar layout. Just to give you an example, like in this area, there was a path provided to this location with a designated crossing right here would be something we would likely be looking at. But I think the thought was to see where people are actually walking and then respond accordingly to provide striping at that point.
Sure. Sure. Now, I know the pedestrian concerns will be raised by members in the audience as well, but so not to steal their thunder, but I want to make sure the engineer has an answer, or someone has an answer on whether or not, I know it had been brought up to either have raised crosswalks or flashing beacons, and I'm curious if the engineer would be able to explain to us the feasibility of either of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about the notion of what the crosswalk would look like in this area. As Mr. Courtney mentioned, the walking train that is currently approximately here mid-block is being relocated to the north to the intersection. What we looked at is there are national standards in an FHWA publication for how you handle pedestrian crossings at unsignalized locations. It's predominantly based upon speed and the amount of volume on the roadway. In this particular case, for Cedar Cliff Drive, 25 miles per hour, the level of volume we're talking about, the crossing as being presented is actually appropriate, and we're actually more on the conservative side for what's being provided between the pavement markings, the ADA crossings, and the signage. The other item that we discussed at length is based on the counts we completed at the existing crossing. That crossing is predominantly utilized by the walking train based on the counts throughout the course of the day. While we acknowledge there may be some increase in that with the sheets as a pedestrian generator, fact remains that the predominant use of that will be the walking train, which actually has a designated crossing guard that actually controls the traffic. So having a flashing signal at that time would be somewhat redundant in the fact that the way the walking train works is when they pick up at the Allendale intersection, they proceed to the north. The crossing guard actually stops the students, walks out into traffic, stops traffic, has all of the students cross. Once they're safely on the opposite side, then he continues on to the other side. So he's essentially acting as in his role as crossing guard, stopping traffic in that area. So the combination of the standards not supporting additional, like a flashing crosswalk, and the fact that there is that crossing guard during that peak time, we really don't think there is a need for any more than what is currently proposed.
Now, my other concern would be then with the same crosswalk would be they're crossing onto an island, maybe 15, 20 feet wide there. Is that a concern that all the students are able to get up onto that island, and would it make sense to cross somewhere else where they could all fit?
Yeah, so I think the students will ultimately be able to assemble in this area. You're talking on the western side here is where we're talking about. What we looked at is shifting. Obviously, the location we've chosen is very specific in the fact that it brings the pedestrian crosswalk into the controlled intersection, which is more desirable than having it at a mid-block location. We also kept it on the southern side of the intersection because it is on the side with less turning movements to and from that driveway. So for example, on the northern side, you would expect there to be more volume, more potential conflict. So it was specifically located on this side of the driveway, is the reason it's where it's at.
There are high school students, though, who are going to be walking there and crossing, and honestly, we even have, I have concerns for senior citizens for that matter. And there won't be anybody crossing the senior highs, right? This is a walking train.
Yeah, the crossing guard is specific for the walking train.
There are a lot of high school students that are in and around the Allendale subdivision, and also coming from New Cumberland. There are many, right, because I used to teach these kids. And so I really am not sure that the crossing guard idea is going to solve that problem.
Well, I think from all of the counts we completed with the pedestrians, aside from the walking train, and like I said, we acknowledge there may be some increase utilizing this crosswalk. I would expect the bulk of the pedestrians associated with the high school in particular will be oriented off of Carlisle Road, obviously going from the borough to the school. Most of those crossings are at the signalized intersection where we are doing the substantial upgrades to pedestrian crossings. So for example, in the afternoon, what we would expect is that if a student decides to utilize the sheets on their way from school walking home, that they would use the designated crosswalk and the pedestrian signals at the signal, head to the south and utilize access the site that way, as opposed to walking down Cedar Cliff to use the unsignalized crossing, where it would be more logical to cross at the intersection. So as far as the school student traffic, we would expect it to be concentrated up at the signal.
You're not expecting the students to go up Cedar Cliff Drive and go into the school from the other side, from the back side?
So we completed 4 days of counts out here with pedestrian traffic. The predominant movement for school traffic and pedestrians is the Carlisle Road corridor.
Carlisle.
Correct.
Gary, the pedestrian signals at Cedar Cliff Drive and Carlisle Road would remain silent, so to speak, until someone pushes a button?
Yes, so the upgrades in particular that we're doing are, we're upgrading all of the pedestrian equipment. So there will be new hand-man signals with countdown timers. All of the push buttons will be updated at the intersection. You'll have the continental style crosswalks, and then to your point is there would also be an audible chirp when a pedestrian is able to go on a particular crossing. So there is an audible component to the new style push buttons that can be utilized as well to alert them audibly. And then as Dan mentioned, we have discussed and are going to be including that blackout, no turn on red sign. The concern that was raised, as Dan described, was in the morning, this right-hand turn movement from Cedar Cliff is a heavy movement. The concern was even today there's not a whole lot of pedestrian crossings in this location, but with the sheets, there may be a potential for that to be. So the way it would work is if a pedestrian is on either side of this intersection and pushes the pedestrian button, it will activate the no turn on red sign for this approach. But outside of that, that sign will be blacked out, and these vehicles will be able to make the right turn on red to keep traffic moving and operating efficiently. But it will account for and allow for that no turn on red when somebody is looking to cross that leg.
But I think you're saying what I suggested. The signals will not be in a sequence.
Correct.
Someone will have to physically push a button to
Yes.
activate.
There is not going to be designated pedestrian phases for this signal. So the way that the pedestrian phasing will work is the crossing of the northbound leg and the southbound leg. These pedestrians will be available for walk when your main line turning movements are going, and vice versa. These would be able to go as your side streets are going.
I have a couple more questions. First, and this might be better for staff to answer. I know PennDOT needs to approve any traffic control device, which is why the RRFBs have to be approved through PennDOT permit. My question is, are we still able to put those bright green signs indicating a crosswalk? If we want to put one on each side, say PennDOT doesn't let us have a flashing beacon there, are we able to at least put those two signs up on either side of the crosswalk? Yeah, this crosswalk right here.
And we actually have those signs all provided.
Okay, wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. And in addition to that, there had been some discussion about a speed limit sign as well that currently isn't there that would be going in.
Yes, so right here in this location, it's a little bit hard to see here, but there are two signs that are currently exist on this post related to trucks on Cedar Cliff Drive. We're proposing to add an additional sign to that post for a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit sign. And then there is an existing sign generally in this location as you head towards the Allendale community as well.
Sure. Now, I know, and some other residents had suggested this, so I won't take credit for their idea, but I like the idea to paint in big letters 25 miles per hour in this area. Is that something that we would be able to do with the funding that Sheets is providing with that $10,000? And my understanding with my conversations with staff is that the maintenance cost is relatively little, and the maintenance is every 5 to 7 years. So if the commission would like to weigh in on that, that's something I'd very much be in favor of moving forward. And if those funds are provided to us, we're able to use that for that use.
Yeah, you can use it for whatever, pedestrian transportation related improvements from our perspective, so it's understood.
I have just two questions. One is regarding alcohol and beer. Is the intent to have beer sales, at least eventually?
Yeah, that'd be the plan.
And is there a process in which has already been initiated, or is that going to happen soon? I mean, I'm just curious to know how that's going to roll out.
Well, I would imagine you know.
We have a process internal. It's not part of the real estate department, but we will be applying for a license to sell beer at this location. But it won't be. We typically don't open a store with it. It's something that happens after that.
Okay.
After the opening.
So we can expect that maybe within 12 months or so with the store opening somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Just curious. And then my next question was, has there been any buddy who has reached out, or have we talked to public safety at all? I see this potentially as an opportunity. I'm sure there's going to be security cameras and things of that nature, and just the general flow of traffic. Has there been an opportunity yet to have a discussion prior with the Sheets folks, with our public safety, just to see if there's some synergies and how we collect information and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's something that we'd be happy to do as we kind of get into the next step. There is, Sheets does have kind of 24/7 security, kind of, through the cameras. So it's something that's continually monitored, but it's something that, I think Sheets can sit down with you and kind of say, here's what we have, and here's what our procedures are.
Right, I'm thinking maybe there can be some two-way,
Yep.
information being passed there to maybe help make that as efficient as it could be for us. I mean, especially if we're going to have to be responding, and they can probably let you folks know what works best, I would think. That's all I had. Are there any?
Mr. President, I just have one additional point I'd like to bring up.
Sure.
And it regards public safety again, and maybe the director or someone on staff might know this. I understand community service officers often conduct the crossing. Sometimes it's a PSO, and on rare occasions it's a sworn officer. I'm curious if we can't get the flashing beacon, which is my understanding, and I'm sure we'll hear in a few minutes about as to why that might not be feasible. But if flashing beacon is not feasible, another thought that I think would make logical sense would be the CSO vehicles are equipped with lights, correct?
Yes.
And would those lights be able to, would a CSO be able to say perhaps park on here somewhere that would make sense and flash lights while kids are crossing as an alternative if we're not able to get a flashing beacon?
Currently, they do that at the Carlisle crosswalks, but they park at the side of the road and then they cross the kids as a part of that. So, but in the walking train situation, what they do is they actually meet them and then they walk them up to the school. So they'd be outside of the vehicle doing a walk. So you would take a second PSO to actually do that, to have a vehicle station there, and then it would depend upon whether or not that's, at least you have parking up along Carlisle Road. I'd have to look at it. I'm not quite sure how that would work in terms of that kind of lighting.
Right. And I don't think the shoulders are going to be wide enough in this corridor here to park a vehicle. And I'm curious, and forgive me, the lights, there's no way to control those remotely if a CSO were to cross the street and then...
Vehicle lights?
Right.
No.
Okay.
No. They're activated out of the vehicle itself.
So that's not really a feasible option either without committing a second CSO to go down?
That would be problematic.
Okay.
So if there's no further questions from the commissioners, I'd like to get our... go ahead, Commissioner Black.
Just two. Probably for Eric. Eric, one of the comments from the township was that parking spaces must be a minimum of 10 feet from the building. And in your response, you indicated that the plan's been revised to accommodate that 10-foot setback, but it does reduce the width of the drive aisle. Is that a hazard?
No. I don't. So I'll take you to the site plan. So the drive aisles that we had, I can't read that dimension there, exceeded the minimum for the township requirements, which I believe are 24 feet. It was this area here, and I think it was about a 2-foot shift. I think we had 8, we needed to go to 10. And I think it went from, it's greater than 30, I have to think. It's 35. Yeah, 33 feet of drive aisle. So it was just, we were just closing that.
But a delivery truck can still get through there okay?
Yes, yeah, we redid the, emergency vehicle turning movement, and it's fine. Yep.
And you may be the one to answer this. Can we go back to the drainage plan? You specify that there will be a different type of planting actually in the pond.
That is correct.
Can you describe what that is?
It's just a different type of seed mixture, with the stormwater being collected in this area and infiltrating. It's gonna be wet for an extended period of time, so that seed mixture lends itself to more of a wet climate. Whereas if you were just to plant regular grass, it would die off.
But I presume that will be a rather short grass, correct?
Yes, yeah.
And then around that, around the perimeter, you call for meadow grass. Will that be a tall grass?
No. No,
But it requires less mowing.
yes. It's just, everything will be, maintained as typical lawn. It's not meant to be, overgrown.
It's not meant to look like a naturalistic plant.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Okay, now, you said about you shortened the width of the driveway. Your delivery trucks can get in. What about emergency apparatus?
Yeah, we ran those turning movements and they work good.
You have no trouble getting anything in there, including a ladder truck?
Correct. We ran the fire truck around that building. Yep, coming in this access and looping around.
Is it safe to say that only those who are looking and recognizing the what you and Ed were just talking about, that's not going to look like anything but a grassy area?
Yes, correct. Yeah, it's just something to satisfy an NPDS permit.
And you cannot exit on Carlisle Road?
That's correct.
Can you enter off of Carlisle Road?
No.
Okay, no accident. Good. Okay, thank you.
The only other thing I had.
Oh, God, no.
Apologize, just want to make sure I'm doing my due diligence here to make sure that our pedestrians and our students are safe when they're crossing the street. So thank you. Do you have any concerns about the crosswalk going over the stormwater inlet? Is that something that's common?
I'm not sure it goes over the inlet, quite honestly.
Where's the inlet in relation to the crosswalk?
The inlet's right there.
Just next to it?
Yeah.
How many
Okay.
15 minutes?
And then
to
the
sit
other
there?
one, yeah.
Okay. Mr. President, I thank the board members of the audience for their patience during my questions, and that's all I have. Thank you.
And thank you for the members of the public who've waited so graciously, and we're going to have you come up now. I will start with Ms. Coker, if you'll, you're going to defer. Okay. So, Mr. Manager, did you make note of all of the folks that would like to come up?
I did.
Could you maybe ask them to come up one at a time and let Ms. Coker come up somewhere in the middle?
Well, Mrs. McNeil was next. She's deferring. Mr. LaFleur? Mr. Kaufman? Yay, Mr. Kaufman. Let's have a hand for Mr. Kaufman, stepping up.
My name is Gordon Kaufman. I'm at 308 Blacklatch Lane. My question really was answered by Mr. Flint. I am concerned about the right turn on Red when you're turning from Carlisle Road to, or from Cedar Cliff Drive to Carlisle Road. Which cursor? When you're right here and the light's red, you think you might be able to turn on red. You're concentrating on traffic, not only the kids. And so I really like the idea of putting putting some kind of a no turn on red when light is activated, when there are students or people wanting to cross. And I would suggest it be not only at this intersection, but this as well in either direction, because kids coming back this way still could get into trouble if the driver was looking only at traffic, tried to turn right on red. So activation from either direction of those two crossings, and really that was my only concern.
Thank you.
And Ms. Metz?
I'm going to defer most of my remarks to Jen because I don't want to be redundant of what she's planning on saying. I have a question about the process. Under the ordinance, there's a requirement for a planning commission recommendation and report, a written report from the planning commission. And we all went to the planning commission and spent a lot of time, talking and hopefully working out a lot of the concerns there. And the planning commission made a recommendation to approve, but it was contingent on something dealing with the pedestrian concerns, and that wasn't brought up today. And I understand it's because the planning commission hasn't approved their minutes yet, but which I understand, just the logistics of the process. So I'm certainly not going to object because it's not Sheets' fault that they didn't follow the ordinance. But I do think it's important for the recommendation of the Planning Commission, specifically the contingencies that they made limiting their recommendation for approval, be brought before the board.
Thank you for your comment, Mrs. Betts. I have in front of me what we would approve tonight if we decided to, would be with contingents on it. It's listed for us, approval based on some contingencies. As far as the minutes go, it's my understanding, or as far as the process from the Planning Commission to issue a report, it's been the process in the township that comes from the minutes. And those minutes are approved on a monthly basis. Of course, there's a meeting once a month for the Planning Commission that's scheduled. And so those minutes, because that meeting happened last month, they get approved, of course. But we didn't see anything material in the minutes that would suggest otherwise. That would run contrary to anything we would approve tonight with the contingencies attached to them.
Can I just say that I went down to the township offices this morning to ask for a copy of the report of the Planning Commission, and it sounds like you're using the draft minutes as that report. So it seems like that should have been, I don't know that you can have it both ways. I don't think you can say these draft minutes are the report, and then when someone goes to the township offices and asks for a copy of the report, not to disclose it.
Yeah, I do understand that and how that technicality.
And I'm not going to object because
Right.
I'm just saying it's not an appropriate process. And I think there's issues with your right to know processes that really need to be re-examined because it's tough to come and comment when I don't even know what's before you. And it's tough for me to comment on whether or not those contingencies conflict with what you're going to approve tonight without ever having seen them. So I'm just saying that for future reference, that I think that's really something that should be reevaluated.
Well, thank you for your comment, and I do appreciate your comments. Mr. Manager, can you just elaborate what we've done in the past and why we consider the minutes, so to speak, as being the draft or a report from the Planning Commission?
Certainly. We have staff liaison to the Planning Commission. We also usually have a commissioner liaison to the Planning Commission to speak first-person account of what happened at the Planning Commission. So the minutes have always been considered the written report. We don't do a separate transcript or regurgitation of what happened at the Planning Commission. It's not seen as necessary when you have minutes and staff and commissioner representation. So in this case, the Planning Commission did not meet in February, So the January meeting minutes were not approved. And they will be approved at the next time the planning commission meets. So that's why we do not have, I just want to clarify something that Ms. Metz said we didn't follow the ordinance. It's not exactly accurate. We don't have the report because the planning commission didn't approve it, not because we don't have minutes. So that's just a clarification. Those minutes will be available following the planning commission's March meeting. So
Mr.
ready?
President, I think the manager's point's well made, and I would just like to add over the years that I've been on the board, having the liaisons and staff at the planning commission meetings where there is input back and forth, we know for sure what, and the plan is reflective of what that body might suggest in tandem with what the applicant is submitting. So we value the planning commission very much, and we always have. And so they are well represented in the planning process.
Okay. And Ms. Metz, I apologize. I understood your name to be Betts. So I addressed you as Ms. Betts earlier, as Ms. Metz. I beg your pardon.
Mr. President, if I may, I would also like to say, I think Ms. Metz's point is also well taken, though, because speaking as someone who sat in the audience for about 15 months before I took office here, there were a number of times I was frustrated at the amount of information that was available to me as a member of the public. But I think from a transparency perspective, we certainly can strive to do better, and I think it might be good practice moving forward, and perhaps this is a good way to highlight the issue with our current system. Planning commission meets once a month. In this case, there would have been a planning commission meeting before we heard this plan. So perhaps in the future, the planning commission, so long as there's a meeting before something comes before us, can take action, even if they just have to come to approve the minutes. I think that is a worthwhile thing for them to do, because I think it is important that what we have here be made available to the public. And I've asked, and I'm not able to share this with the public, and I don't like that very much as someone who sat out there for the longest time and feeling I was in the dark a good bit. So I think we can certainly strive to do better and be more transparent. Maybe that's something we can take to mind in the future. And thank you.
Thank you, noted. All right. Melissa.
Thank you again. It was great meeting with some of you as we have prior to this, and hearing this whole process that began with Betsy showing up in my driveway back on, I believe it was August 5th, with the sign saying this is going in. To imagine that it's taken this long, and all of the good things and a lot of bad things along the way that we've learned. But a few things I just wanted correction on. Will there be a left turn arrow coming off of Cedar Cliff Drive onto Carlisle Road? Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. We thought so, but that's kind of been lost in some of these meetings. And you're saying Cedar Cliff Drive is 25 miles per hour. And that's been reiterated over and over again with the flashing beacon. It's not fast enough. Why was the speed hump put in right outside the cliffs if it's not fast? Is there any? And we've also had the speed information up for 3 weeks. There's data. I know when I've asked in Allendale, and I appreciate the help that I get from the public safety officers, he will send me the data. The fastest speed going down Allendale Way was 52 miles per hour. Going northbound, it was 48.6 miles per hour, the average speeds. So I know the data is out there, but it's amazing that we keep hearing that the speed limit is only 25. Yet we had the speed devices up for 3 weeks and a speed hump put in.
Thank you. Ms. Coker?
Thank you. Do you need address and all that stuff, or
I'm sorry?
do you need my address and all of those things, or are you good?
Well, we didn't get anybody else's. I think we have them all on record at some place.
Yeah, I'm here. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes and thank everyone that's been involved. Specifically, the commissioners, the various commissioners that have met with us and talked with us, Commissioner Balone, Commissioner Black, Commissioner Kutz, for your time that you have spent, how you have engaged with us and other neighbors on this, your patience, your listening, you're taking your time to hear what we had to say and absorb some of our questions and some of the things that we had wanted to know. Also wanted to say thank you to Sheets. Sheets has done a good job in listening to us, engaging with us, answering questions, showing that they are going to be a good neighbor is what we hope, and we continue to get assurances that they're going to continue along that vein as we move forward. And that's one of the things that we want to do. And it's surprising, we didn't find that always to be the case, not necessarily with Sheets, but with everyone that was involved in the process along the way. And so we'd like to say thank you for that. One of the things that, or two of the things that I just want to clarify or emphasize along the way, or maybe possibly a question for, I think it'll probably be Eric here, but one of the things that Commissioner Kutz had brought up was the signs and the painting on the roadway and encouraging that. One of the things with the traffic signals and signs that are in there is that we all are aware that that's a busy intersection with a lot of different businesses and employers there, and there's sign blindness. I mean, how many of you have put out yard signs for your campaigns and found them smushed in with everybody else's and you can't necessarily see it? So I think you experience the same thing there when it comes to the different speed limit signs. And when you're going from a 55-mile-an-hour highway down into a 25-mile-an-hour, I mean, it's a 30-mile-per-hour drop in a very short distance. Having that indication on the roadway where you're not necessarily seeing it, it's just like on 83 when you're coming south and you have the 283, 83 and the things that are painted on the roadway, and that helps you be aware of where you are and what is going on there. One of the things that I did have a question about when we had talked about the crossing there, and that what we had there was already exceeding standards and that it would not be appropriate for a flashing crossing at that particular time, and that the standards don't necessarily support that. Can there be exemptions, and can we apply for something like that with PennDOT for an exemption to those particular rules and have the flashing crossing installed anyway? I didn't, yeah, but that would be PennDOT that would do that even though it's not a PennDOT road, correct?
Consider a traffic signal, so PennDOT would have to approve it.
Okay, and that would be something we could possibly do along those lines, and possibly with the support of, hopefully with the support of the township and possibly Sheets, if we do hit that type of level of safety concerns in that area once we got things up and rolling. And that's one of the things with the $10,000 that you said we could use toward these types of, the township could use toward these types of safety things, that I would encourage the township that with that money to look at ways to improve and ensure the safety, that is a dangerous area, it's a dangerous region. The flashing signals were installed on Carlisle Road previously due to the fatality of the student that was there. And so it's something where we want to continue with that and try to keep that safety in mind. And Sheets is giving that money and saying that that's there for our use along those lines, and we would like to see that.
Thank you.
Mr. LaFleur.
Mr. Lepore withdraws. Anybody else?
Mr. President, if there are no other public comments, I have an additional follow-up questions I'd like, and perhaps Township Engineer would be able to help us out and discuss your opinion on an application to PennDOT for an RRFB. I know we've had discussions about it. Would you mind just sharing your thoughts on application, what criteria PennDOT looks for, and if you know of any exemptions that were mentioned might be appropriate?
Well, PennDOT has a letter with guidance on how to apply and what applies for the RRFB. It's 13 pages long, the letter of explanation. I won't go into it. But I'll just give you a little background, because I think most everybody's familiar with the RRFBs in place on Carlisle Road. We had made a request to PennDOT to, and this was because the school district had safety concerns. This goes back to 2010 or 2011. We made a request to PennDOT for additional signage and signals along Carlisle Road, and that request was turned down. It wasn't until after the fatal accident that we were issued the permit, put in the RRFBs. So, you know the conditions on Carlisle Road, the volume of traffic, the speed of traffic, the number of pedestrians and school children there, and our request was turned down. So if you look at those same characteristics on Cedar Cliff Drive, they're all much less.
Should they look at speed of traffic or speed limit?
Ed,
Well, they look at all the characteristics associated with whatever the location is, the traffic and the physical
So
characteristics.
that would involve a study, so perhaps if they find the average speed is 42 instead of 25, and again, that's not a study, that's a number I just made up for the record. If they find the average speed exceeds the speed limit, is that the speed they would use in assessing it, or more the 25 miles per hour?
It's hard to say. It's not a yes or no question to answer how they would look at something like that.
And the information I believe I have is about $10,000 for one of those at a crosswalk, is that
No.
15? Now, is that for each side or one unit total per crosswalk? Okay.
Almost 10 years ago, and
And
that
that-
does not count the permitting costs and the
And the
and this
permanent-
traffic study cost.
And that you estimated to be several $1,000s as well?
Yes.
Okay. So without being able, so my concern, I certainly like the idea of having the flashing beacons, and unfortunately, my idea to have the flashing lights is shot down, so short of bringing on another CSO, that's not a possibility. So your opinion's that it's not feasible and not even worth an application to PennDOT for it?
Not that, we don't even know if the school crossing train is going to be using it.
Is that something we could revisit after we know about next school year, how the school crossing works? Because if Sheets is providing the money, it seems to me as though the prudent thing to do would be to evaluate it, and if we decide that it's needed to use that money to make those necessary improvements. Mr. President, is that something that we're able to revisit? Right, so we can take, if action is, if it's the board's desire to take action tonight, notwithstanding those concerns, we could return to revisit an application for it, contingent on whatever the school board decides they're gonna do with the walking trail.
Well, I mean, I would think that we would be able to do that if we decided to do it at any time.
So it's my understanding that the money Sheets has been willing to give us, we could use for a permanent application, correct?
I would believe so.
Okay. Okay.
We've been in contact with the superintendent, and we've asked the township where.
Can you come up here again, please? Thank you.
And Dr. Stoltz, when we met with him last Thursday, he said, that's not the school district's choice, that's public safety's choice. We've come to the township asking, where are you going to cross them? That is not the township's decision, that's the school district's choice. That's what we've been told. And it's just been a whole game of not it. And that's where we're kind of frustrated in this whole process. And I understand it's, in your eyes, it's only 20 to 30 kids. Well, those 20 to 30 kids are very important to all of us in Allendale as well. And to see a crosswalk, I know it's just one crosswalk, but there are a lot of people that will use that. Even if we go down to Allendale, I know it's a flashing beacon, I know it's 13 pages that we would have to read through. 13 pages compared to 20, 30 kids, I think it would be worth it.
And I think that we all, are going to be really concerned about the safety of those walkways as we move forward, and I think we're going to be very vigilant about it. And I'm sure you guys will be here to hold our feet to the fire. So, sure. Yep. If you can, will you come up to the podium, please?
I just wanted to point out that I had asked about the cost of a flashing beacon, and I think I was told it would be $15,000 plus the engineering studies, which would be a couple $1,000s more. So the $10,000 isn't going to cut it.
Right.
Thank you.
The
Are-
other,
I'd like, would you have Commissioner Cutts?
the other outstanding question one of the residents raised was, which I think is a valid question, is why there was you have the raised crosswalk at the entrance to the cliffs, and what differentiates that to this crosswalk.
Mr. Engineer?
We've been contacted by a number of residents about, they were concerned because they did cross the street there. They were having issues with safety using the crosswalk in the former condition. They asked us to look at what might be able to be done there. And out of the things that are available to use in that type of situation, that was seemed the most feasible application at that location.
Was that our decision then, Dan? Did we go ahead and, were we able to make that decision?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess I'm just confused if it was resident concern over that crosswalk that prompted us to act. We seem to have resident concern here. Why would we not consider that? And I believe the answer I got before was about a mid-block crossing. But if it's resident concern, is there another reason why you wouldn't put a raised crosswalk here where the students are going to cross?
Well, the resident concern is why we did the study. And that was what came out of the study. But as you say, a mid-block crosswalk is different than an intersection crosswalk. And there's a whole different there's a different process to do the study even for a mid-block crosswalk to determine if it can be put in or should be put in. There's a whole traffic calming procedure to go through in order to do that if it's not at an intersection. The intersection crosswalk is much easier to deal with.
The gentle lady's point in the audience is that there is another crosswalk down here at Allendale Way and Cedar Cliff Drive, which is just off of our screen, which we saw earlier. And the point is, we could put a raised crosswalk here instead of here to slow traffic. I guess it's slightly more here, to slow traffic down. And could that slow traffic down enough coming off of this to improve safety at this crosswalk? Does anyone have an opinion on that feasibility, or is that going to require more study?
Not sure what you were asking. If you move the crosswalk down further to Allendale, you don't need a crosswalk here.
So correct me if I'm wrong, I saw one of the first things you brought up said there's a crosswalk here at Allendale Way crossing from Cedar Cliff Drive. And I understand students can't cross all the way down here because of the width of these islands are too narrow or not long enough to fit all the students. So the question, I think it's well taken, is this one remains flat because it's mid-block crossing, but if we move it, even if that one stays there, can we still make the existing crosswalk at Allendale Way and Cedar Cliff Drive a raised crosswalk? Because that would seem to mimic the conditions up at the entrance to the cliffs that warranted a raised crosswalk.
Well, if we've already done that study, then okay, we're good.
I'm asking, does that warrant further study to?
At this point, I think we're kind of migrating into a separate discussion because what we're discussing tonight, I mean, in this has to do with the process that took place. And it seems that we should have this discussion again if it's something that we want to do from the public standpoint and certainly ours. And so I'm not sure that we're going to solve that here tonight with regard to whether or not we approve this docket at this point. I mean, I'm not sure we're going to actually solve that. So I think we should probably, I'm not sure how we resolve this right now, if we do at all, but I would suggest that we continue the discussion with these concerns for safety and bring it up again at another meeting, perhaps.
Is there a clock on this?
Yes.
And if so, what is it?
Well, if there's no action tonight, then the applicant would have to offer a time extension.
Okay. What's that process, Dan?
The applicant would offer a
Okay.
time
I mean,
extension.
it would come at a later date? I mean.
No, it would
come
have to be tonight.
Tonight, okay. So, I think we should probably wrap up our discussion on this at this point. And so what's before us is possible action on SLD, excuse me. Possible action on SLD docket number 2019-11, land development plan for Sheets, 1508 Cedar Cliff Drive. Am I sensing, that we would want to put this off, or is this something we want to take action on tonight? And if so, I'd be looking for a motion to approve it.
I'd like to make a motion to approve SLD docket number 2019-11, land development plan for Sheets, 1508 Cedar Cliff Drive. Are we going to take each of these waivers at the same time, then, Mr. President?
I would like to, yes, I would do them all at one time.
Well, then we would, part of this motion would be to approve a waiver of the requirement contained in section 192-24.c to submit a preliminary plan. Second, to approve a waiver of the requirement in section 192-57.b, paren 3, paren I, paren 2, that prohibits driveways from crossing the street right-of-way line within 5 feet of a drainage inlet. Thirdly, to approve a waiver of the requirement in section 192-58.e, paren 10, that planting islands and beds be designed to collect stormwater runoff from adjacent paved parking area.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And there's a footnote that these waivers are not contrary to public interest, and they maintain the purpose and intent of the subdivision and land development ordinance. We'll move on to B.
And Mr. President, I'd like to make the motion that we approve subdivision land development docket number 2019-11, final land development plan for Sheets at 1508 Cedar Cliff Drive, contingent upon the following. Item I, New Cumberland Borough approval. II, PennDOT concurrence with proposed traffic signal modifications. III, providing an executed stormwater management facilities maintenance agreement. And IV, or Roman numeral 4, providing an executed developer's agreement and financial security. And I want to add one new condition, is that we get to the school district and we determine once and for all who's going to determine the safety on Cedar Cliff Drive.
Second.
And I second it.
I have a motion and a second on the floor on the question with an additional contingency added as noted by Vice President Black. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. C.
Well,
go
before
ahead.
we move on to that, I'll be very brief. I want to thank the Sheets design team and legal team and the legal rep and your representative from Sheets for getting with our residents and working through so many of the conditions. And I want to congratulate our staff for participating in that same process. So that's all I have to say, Mr. President.
Thank you.
I would echo that, Mr. President, and the evening at Cedar Cliff that I attended was very well done, because it broke down the issues and people had an opportunity for good give and take, so we thank you for that.
And I would like to also echo those comments as well, and just say that, I mean, we had a long discussion tonight, and it's been a long road, and I couldn't tell you how much I appreciate the public's engagement and sensitivity to this, because this stuff's not supposed to just go over easy. And I do appreciate Sheets making the concessions that you've made, and I have the utmost confidence that, in the end, I think everybody will be somewhat satisfied with the safety aspects surrounding that piece of property. And would encourage you folks to continue to work with the public as much as possible and with our folks to make sure that everybody's as safe as possible down there, and welcome to the township.
And, Mr. President, I will make that 4 to echo my thanks to Sheets for your willingness to work with us and the residents. Again, the Cedar Cliff Open House was great as well. I appreciate your patience as we went through our questions and concerns. Still think we're getting there, and I'm excited for Pennsylvania business to bring, my understanding is 35 jobs to local residents, and who has outstanding community relationships and partnerships, and I think we're getting a good one in terms of the business that Sheets brings. So thank you for that.
Look at it this way, at least we don't have snow.
All right, we're going to move on. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Court.
The condition about get-togethers for the church and all of that, that's kind of more policy statement, nothing you're looking for us to do for purposes of moving our.
I want, Charlie, I would like our manager to get to Todd Stoltz and get a meeting, and if they have to knock each other around, that's fine by me.
But you better not hurt our manager.
Determine who's going to be responsible for
It's
that.
just nothing that Sheets is expecting, Sheets in connection with getting.
I'm not expecting Sheets to do that. I'm
Okay.
expecting the two
Agreed.
majesties to take care of it.
Okay, and Mr. Engineer, 8C.
Okay, item C is related to the above item. In order to submit these changes to PennDOT for their review and approval, there's an application to be filed, and I need a resolution from the board that authorizes us to submit that application.
I'd make the motion, Mr. President, to adopt Resolution 2020-R-09, authorizing the township engineer to submit the application for traffic signal approval to PennDOT for the Carlisle Road, Cedar Cliff Drive, I-83 ramp intersection.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the floor. On the question, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. D.
I thought there was a light there.
Okay, item D is related to, it's a similar action related to another SLD docket number 2017-04, which is called 145 South Locust Street, also sometimes known as Locust Street Homes. Just for orientation purposes, pulled that up here. You can see this is the Lower Allen Elementary School at Locust and Gettysburg, and it's the vacant lot some would know as the former Stevenson site, where we've had a plan approved there a couple times, and one of the items that needs to be done in order to get that plan moving along and recorded is to get a highway occupancy permit. Locust Street is a state road. There is some work to be done. There's also some drainage facilities to be installed in the state highway. PennDOT requires the township to be the permit applicant and also to take responsibility for those drainage structures. We in turn have a standard agreement we've developed with applicants so that they are responsible for the storm drainage facilities that they install and not the township. So we end up being in the middle between the property owner and PennDOT. So this resolution would allow the manager to sign our application for the HOP on behalf of the developer, contingent upon getting that executed indemnity agreement from the applicant.
So we still do have a plan on record?
Oh, yes, yeah.
So I'll be looking for a motion on this.
To adopt that
2020
resolution.
Mr. President, I move for the adoption of Resolution 2020-R10, authorizing the township manager to sign the application for a highway occupancy permit for drainage facilities related to SLD docket number 2017-04, 145 South Locust Street, contingent upon receiving an executed indemnity agreement from the applicant.
I have a motion,
Second.
and I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Please say aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, item E is the next payment for the general contractor. This is on the Public Works Building Edition. Penn State Construction is the general.
So I'm looking for a motion to authorize this payment here, number 6 to Penn State Construction, in the amount of $102,510 for general construction on the Public Works Building Addition project.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second from Commissioner Black. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
And item F, this is something we've been doing annually. We interact with the Pennsylvania One Call system on a daily basis as the owner of underground facilities that need to be protected, but also sometimes we ride the excavator. Many of the customers that come into our office for permits and things, we hope, are actively engaged with the One Call system before they're doing work, and we like to promote it as much as possible. One thing that the folks at the One Call agency ask is that we help them to get the word out, and that we do that by adopting a resolution as they recognize around the state April as Safe Digging Month. So that's the resolution R11.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dan. And move on to number 9. I guess our finance director is going to handle this.
Yeah, this was on the agenda last meeting and was held over for discussion with the full board because it does involve long-term plans and actions that staff would be held to in the future. It was a pretty short presentation, so I think I'll just repeat it for the two who weren't here last time. This resolution puts in writing the essential long-term components that were blended together in the 2020 budget process. All the decisions in here were made at that time. There's really no new decisions being made with this resolution. It controls future spending growth while maintaining our strong financial position and bond rating. It really pulls together 4 long-term plans that are being made possible and outlined by this resolution. We have the adopted recommendations of the Public Safety Ad Hoc Committee. We have our typical 5-year capital plan. We have the long-term fire apparatus replacement plan. And we have the fund balance and financial stability plan. These would all be made possible and controlled with departmental non-capital expenditure spending caps. So that would limit the growth on non-capital expenditures year to year in the budget. Let me just start off and say that we have the caps, but in addition to those caps, public safety and fire would get the money they need that would be new spending as a result of the Public Safety Ad Hoc Committee recommendations. So they would get that. In addition, they would get, public safety would get 7.5%, fire 2.5%, and 5.0% for all other operating departments. In addition, we would draw down $1 million of excess fund balance over the next 5 years. And as far as taxes, of course, we have the increase that was done this year. There would be no tax increase next year, and the maximum tax increases after that would be 0.03 mils per year. This outlines the plan. This type of resolution is not legally binding upon the board. You're free to do whatever you want, but what you're really doing here is establishing marching orders for staff. So as long as you keep this plan in place as it was done in 2020, it would continue, staff would act accordingly, present budgets within those guidelines, and take other measures to make sure we stayed within there. So that's basically what this resolution is all about.
Now, Rick, there are some exceptions to these increases, correct?
That is correct.
Such as capital expenditure like a fire truck.
Yes. Capital is not within the spending cap. There's provision for emergencies such as national disaster and uninsured loss, things like that. Additionally, you could always change the plan. The board could, not staff, but the board could change the plan anytime they wanted to.
So it's a guideline.
For you, it's a guideline. For staff, it's policy.
I guess my concern is, I understand the necessity for this plan. My concern is, we did a tax increase 3 years ago. We just did one last year, both before I came on the board. And this kind of says, okay, we're going to be able to go 2 years without a tax increase, and then we're going to need another one. And my thought is, you know, at some point, we're going to get to a point where, how are we okay with saying we're going to raise taxes every 3 years? You know, these costs are expanding without revenues to keep up with it. So we're saying departments can come in at just at outrageous expenses, and it's for this board to decide if all those expenses are necessary. But I would certainly like to see a plan that pushes off a tax increase more than just 2 years from now. I think, and I understand this just says it allows for no more than 0.03 mils, but in my mind, we should be striving to go 5, 6, 10 years without a tax increase. You've got municipalities, and of course every place is different, who've gone 40 years without a tax increase. At some point, people are going to move out when we start raising taxes every 3 years. And it's a concern I had when I first decided to run for the board, is that expenditures are far outpacing revenues, and the board has just kind of decided to go with tax increases in the past. And my point would be tax increases should be a last resort, not a first line of defense. And I think recent policies have made them a first line of defense, and I would certainly like to see a plan that might push the tax increase 3 or 4 years beyond that.
That's fine to do that, but how do you plan on doing that when you have constant growth? I mean, you have to replace cars, you have to replace the emergency apparatus, you have pay raises. What are you to ask everybody to give up their pay raises? And,
Well,
I mean, I'm not being smart or anything, Tom, but you don't pay taxes. I mean,
so-
you live at home,
All
you
right,
don't
that-
have property
Let's
tax.
let's not talk about personal,
And I understand that, and that was
criticisms of the
uncalled
day,
for.
please.
But, I mean, you have to go with the growth. I mean, how do you do that? You can't ask people to just donate. And you have to bring in more revenue, which Aaron, thank God, is doing that for us.
Mr. President, I'd appreciate if perhaps commissioners would refrain from interrupting one another and refrain
Correct.
on personal attacks.
We have to
if
interrupt you, you
possible.
haven't shut up all night.
All right, that's enough. Listen, I think it's my understanding that this isn't a plan, a spending plan. This is just laying out the cap so that every year a budget's still going to come in front of us, and we would still have the ability to approve or disapprove by line item or series of line items as a body, correct?
Absolutely. Oh, no doubt about it.
And so
yeah.
as far as,
That's the
I
first class
think what
township
Commissioner
code.
Kutz is referring to is if we decide, or a part of us ever decide, that it could be brought up for discussion, that we would want to make cuts, or we wouldn't want to, we'd want to stretch our dollar a little differently than we currently do, that we could do that every single year. This is just a guideline?
There are several long-term plans here. The new plan, and the one that really is generating the taxes, was the Public Safety Ad Hoc Committee. But the board was very clear in their direction there. And it was made clear that that it's just not a one-year thing. There are things that happen for about 5 years. So the costs just don't end here. There are some that will continue on, and the plan was presented as far as what that would be. A lot's going to have to do with the economy. Like I've said repeatedly, our revenues are very heavily economically driven. They're economically sensitive. So if the economy expands further, our problems are solved. If it contracts, our problems are worse. And I have no idea. I mean, certainly currently, there's no reason at all to think the economy is going to contract. I don't see any at all, but then, you know, I'm not really an expert, but sooner or later it will. Or it could expand for years. I mean, that is going to impact your future, our future.
I guess what I'm asking is what was put in front of us, because there's a lot of financial accounting language that frankly I don't understand in there,
Yeah.
and I've tried to get some clarification for it, and I think I'm satisfied with the idea that this doesn't tie the board's hand to do what the board needs to do or feel the board needs to do as a whole from a year-to-year basis on a budget. That's correct, right? In
That
what
is
laid
correct.
in front of us.
I don't think you could legally do that to yourselves. And that was never the intent. But these are long-term plans. They were pretty much set in stone at budget time, and they do have no cost. And for staff to be able to plan ahead and put these together takes their time. In some cases, if there's studies or things involved, it may involve cash outlays in advance. A lot of things that staff does sometimes can take years in the planning. So because of that, this resolution is put out for staff to say, yes, this is what we had planned to do and still continue to plan to do until further notice. So staff will act accordingly.
Can you just give an example how you would act accordingly, let's say, in the next budget process, based on this resolution?
Oh, sure. Are you asking?
Well, I get either of these. I mean, maybe Tom, if you just answer right now.
That specific question, I know what I wanted to respond to, why this plan is written the way it is and why we can't change it at this moment. Because staff has been given marching orders. We've been given an operational model to deal with. This plan that the finance director came up with is the most reasonable plan to continue those operations with the minimum tax increase. If you're asking us to come up with a plan that is going to put off tax increases for 10 years, that is serious reductions in services. That's, I mean, you're looking at cuts in staff, because staff is 60% of our budget. So if you want to have any real impact on dollars as far as, you know, tax increases, we don't have the tax base that other municipalities have. We don't have the commercial, we don't have the ongoing construction, we're stuck with what we have. So to cut, to reach a level of expenditure that would get us you know, years, let's say 5 to 10 years without a tax increase, this board is going to have to make some serious decisions on service levels. We're dealing with service levels that you've told us to carry out right now, from public works to public safety to parks, all the way down the line. So just to say, I would like to see, you know, a plan that we can't do that right now. That has to be done in the budget process. I have no idea at this point what services you're interested in cutting to reach that level of expenditures.
Okay. So back to this resolution. This resolution creates caps to make sure we don't exceed what essentially is this model for 2020, and based on all the other, I mean, if you look at the fire fund, we've kind of looked at a spreadsheet during that process that put that out, I think, 6 or 7 years, just to make sure that we can buy the next fire trucks that are going to apparently need replaced from a public safety standpoint. So this, what's in front of us basically says, you know, this is the minimum that would, or not the minimum, this is, there can't be any spending above this.
This would be the maximum.
This would be it. And we would have that kind of guardrail, so to speak, to stay, those bumpers to stay inside of, to carry out, at least for the 2021 budget process.
So,
right, is that a fair assessment?
Yes. And to answer your previous question on what type of situations would we foresee jumping away from this, a couple of things. Number one, I think Rick mentioned it before, would be a severe recession. Something that would reduce our fund balance so much that we would need to implement some other actions, which would maybe be to lower, let's say, public safety's budget from 7.5% to 5%. Again, not easy to do, but it is, you know, it answers an immediate concern, which is keeping our fund balance at a level that is, as Rick mentioned, I'm not going to reiterate the goals with that, but one of them is keeping the bond rating and keeping service levels where the board has decided that they want to be. Other options would be, you know, if we had an opportunity to take advantage of, whether it was for development or something else that would require us to pay more than what we would normally pay, but that will have future dividends down the road somewhere, that would increase our tax base or something like that. So these are some of the items that would push us over the, you know, the 7.5% or 5% or 2%.
Right, but I did not interpret this draft to suggest that we, and correct me if I'm wrong, that suggests that in 2000, I think it's 22, that we would say, well, we would just throw a 0.03 mil tax increase out there, right? I mean,
That's correct.
That would just be that this process would limit those expenditures so that wouldn't go above that if we
Staff
chose
would-
to even
yeah.
do that in the first place, correct?
Staff would not present a budget that exceeded either these caps or those tax limits.
I would just like to say that if I were to find a rebuttal, if you will, to my colleague with respect to how tax increases have been done in 30 years, I've spent sleepless nights trying to figure out how I could justify the few tax increases that I've voted for. I would also say that in all those years, Director Grove's plan or guide is a breath of fresh air, and it's kind of nice to think that I'm assuming that staff has bought into this and that they can see it as a workable plan and a guide that you'll be able to do. So it should, as you've been looking for years, should simplify some of our budgeting, I would think. And here's a footprint, if nothing else. And so, thank you.
Well, yeah, to reiterate President Vallone's point, that this plan does not call for 0.03 tax mill increase. It limits it to that if one is necessary.
And that every single year, starting October, September, whenever we start budgeting, the board still retains the ability to make a decision on the next budget regardless. So, I mean, I agree. I look at this as a good guide rail for us. And then I would also, I mean, entertain, I mean, I think it would be healthy for us at some point, probably in the budget process next year, to start talking about, you know, if we do want to make changes to any of our plans, that, you know, that we should start talking about that.
This is similar to the board's fund balance, 15% of operating budget mentality, and I think that's stood us in good stead over I don't know how many years that's been on the books now, but mid-2000s. Yeah, it's terrific.
Well, Mr. President, I
Yes.
appreciate that there is a cap, and my point, and I guess I could have been better about making the point, is that we should not settle for a tax increase. I think we just need to, if, in my mind, down the road, that's just, it's an option. I just don't want us to say, okay, we're accepting a tax increase right now. And as long as we can say, we do whatever we can to make sure there isn't one, that's good with me. And I appreciate the caps that are going to be put in place here. I think it does give us a good footprint for the future.
You know, I can tell you that a couple of years that I haven't agreed with the tax increase, and I've voted against it. You do what your conscience tells you, you know, and it is a last resort. It isn't something that we look at, okay, this is what we're going to do. In my mind, it's been a last resort for all the years I've been on the board. unfinished. Are you looking for a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2020-R-07, expenditure limit and fiscal policy, and with the explanation that this will stay in effect until this board, a majority of this board, sees that that resolution amount has to be changed.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Grove, for taking the time to do that. And we really appreciate, for lack of a better term, that for the township, you're a tightwad. We appreciate that.
With all loving kindness.
Yeah. You know, Rick Grove, call it TW, right? That's it.
All right.
Oh, that's great.
Economic development, Ms. Trone?
So, the Development Authority has submitted their land development, it's actually really more of a subdivision plan for Lower Allen Commons, which is, we've been referring it to as the former Bonton project. That will go before Planning Commission next month. When a plan is submitted, typically, we would charge them a fee for staff review time and a submission fee. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the Development Authority to ask for a waiver of the submission fee. I have a memo for you, it totaled about $495. The reason you would consider this is because it's helping the township as a whole move forward. I also asked for a waiver of the land development improvement security, sometimes called the developer's escrow. That's $500 for the Bonton project.
May I ask a question about is there now a Lower Allen Township Community and Economic Development Department?
Yes.
I knew of the authority, I didn't know there was a department. Okay.
Mr. President, I would make the motion to waive fees for subdivision and land development plans for Lower Allen Commons.
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Next.
You did the fees, you want to do the development improvement security?
Do you have anything else on that? Before we make a motion? Are you better?
No, I wrote this.
Okay,
Well,
oh, okay.
In that case, I'm
A and
happy
B,
to.
A and B are kind of together then.
In that case, I'll make a motion to waiver of development improvement security for Lower Allen Commons.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Question, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Motion carries 5-0.
Mr.
Next.
President, for the sake of transparency, I want everyone to realize that I am a member of the Development Authority, that I voted for both of these items because I think they're good items and they're for the benefit of the township.
Thank you for your service on the authority.
And of course, if we don't do what we said we're going to do, you know where to find us, so. Okay. So the next item, as we're developing the property, we're going to be slightly altering the way the stormwater flows right now. So it flows towards the back of the property, which is actually PennDOT's kind of basin. And in order to amend that basin and any of the drainage on the site, we need to have their approval. PennDOT has requested that when we do drainage agreements, that it is entered with the municipality, which would be Lower Allen Township and not Lower Allen Township.
Reinvent the wheel, so, thank you.
And, Mr. President, I would also echo my comments of support for efforts to restore Sheepford Road Bridge. I think infrastructure has to be a priority in all levels of government. When we think about the core essential functions of government, infrastructure is chief among them. Infrastructure drives growth, it drives the economy, it drives property value, and I think especially with Slate Hill Bridge closing this summer for a year and Spangler's Mill Bridge going out for a period for pipeline construction. I think investing in our infrastructure is vitally important for the future of the township and for whatever growth we hope to see. And Mr. President, I strongly support these efforts, and with that, I would make a motion to approve this letter of support from the Lower Island Township Board of Commissioners to the York County Board of Commissioners, lending our support to efforts to restore Shepherd Road Bridge.
Second.
Mr. President, may I come on as your solicitor?
Please.
You're CCing Mr. Stoner, who is the director of the Cumberland County Planning. Would we also not want to CC the director of the York County Planning? Since
I mean, we can certainly add her to it.
I'm
but
thinking just
I'll-
for complete coverage.
But since we're sending it to the York County
Yeah.
Commissioners, I thought, they would share it with their staff, but I can add her to the CC.
Just for consistency.
Yeah, thank you for catching that. And I guess I can ask the question of the solicitor. Does the letter do its job in showing our support and yet, not suggesting that we would like to pay for it?
Yeah, I think it makes it clear you support them finding alternative funding sources.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Call for the question, Mr. President.
Okay, I have on the question, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Can I ask who the second was on that?
I think we will.
Okay. Okay, and the final item on here tonight is House Bill 1400. This is the small wireless facility thing that's been now in the House for 3 sessions, or this is the 3rd session. There was a presentation done by the West Shore Council of Governments, Capital Region Council of Governments, attorney on this matter, Mr. Cohen, from the Cohen Law Group, at the last COG meeting, and I believe Commissioner Shin, Commissioner, and President Malone attended. The reason this is such an issue is that it's probably coming up again for a vote. It's failed the last, I'm sorry, let me correct my language. It hasn't failed the last 2 times. The vote has been canceled the last 2 times because of pressure, I guess, from municipalities and municipal groups. My understanding is they're going to come back again in March. So we're poised, I guess, to continue opposing this. The main reason, and there's been compromises made on both sides, but the sticking point is the sovereignty of our rights of way. We've agreed they've reduced the shot clock from 90 to 60 days, and that's fine. Keep in mind, a year ago, the FCC passed a whole bunch of new regulations on these types of distributed antenna systems. What House Bill 1400 does is attempts to make it even more severe on local municipalities. So they reduced the shot clock from 90 to 60 days. They set certain fees that you can charge for these things being in your rights of way. Those are all acceptable. But the whole point is we have residents who want broadband services. Everybody, they've got phones, they've got tablets, they've got smart refrigerators that, send them a message when their power is out. So the need for broadband services is there, and we agree with that. And they can't cite any cases where a municipality has stifled that kind of expansion. So what this bill does is essentially turn over our rights away to the broadband industry and their contractors. And we just think that there is a happy medium where we can allow these things to come into our neighborhoods, but in ways that are not intrusive.
We were encouraged by COG to notify our representatives, and I took the liberty of doing that. And in my email to Representative Delosier, I basically asked, please don't take away our sovereignty, as if there are so many other governors already in the zoning power that we have that will keep us from saying you can't do this, which is what allegedly they're afraid of. So
I think what the compromise does is allows Mrs. Brown to turn on her tablet in the morning, but not have to look out her window and see a pole in her yard.
Yeah.
So I guess my point for bringing this up to the board is to, again, give you the PowerPoint, gives you a little bit of background information on this thing. I admit it's one-sided. It's presented by our attorney. The sponsoring legislator, Representative Ferry, has a completely different opinion of this. But I'm trying to find out what the board's intention is so that when it comes time, do you want me to write another letter to Representative Delozier? We've already sent her two. Each time that this thing has come up with a new bill number, we send her a letter and tell her we're opposed to it. So would you like to send another letter prior to the March vote? Are we fine the way things are, or do you even agree with sending a letter in opposition to 1400?
Well, the first piece of policy that I ever attracted my attention before I became involved was this one. And I remember the public hearing, and I think I even spoke at it, and I spoke in thanking the board for its not just rolling over. And the ordinance was changed to clarify some things so that the board could retain its autonomy in some of the decision-making with regard to anticipating these type of facilities, I guess they call them nodes, coming in. And so, I mean, I remain in favor of that. I mean, I do see they've cleaned up the 1400 a little bit, you know, and I think it just, you know, they added some additional fees that go back to the townships, increase those significantly, which could be the reason why some of the second-class townships, I believe, might have jumped on board. But I still think that we should retain, I just don't want our neighbors to be calling and saying, hey, why is so-and-so digging a giant hole, they think, you know, in their yard, you know, and in the right-of-way without any oversight from us.
These are going to be along the curb.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not opposed to them. I think we're all, with these right here, we're all demanding that they put more of them in because we want it faster. And with autonomous vehicles coming online, it's inevitable, but I think that we should retain as much of our control over how they go in and when they go in as much as possible.
There's also some feeling that this may be, you know, once we give up our rights for wireless, what else are we going to give up our rights to in the rights of way? So, I mean, it's sort of a precedent that nobody wants to. So.
Is anybody opposed to showing our representative that we still are?
I think we should. I think it's a good idea.
So, Tom, there you go. I would just do another letter. I don't think we need to do a resolution at this point. Okay. Is that good?
That is good.
All
That's
right.
all I have to.
We'll go around, starting this way tonight. Mr. Flint? Mr. Eby?
I only have about 20 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, sir, thank you.
You know, my first 3 or 4 meetings have been 2.5, 3 hours long.
Oh, no.
It's a busy time of year, and we have a lot to do.
Mr. Grove?
Nothing.
Mrs. Secretary? Mr. Manager?
The only thing I have is a reminder that on Wednesday at 2 p.m. we'll be holding our township all-employee meeting. And you're all invited to not only attend, but get up and speak if you would like.
Cool.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to thank our MS4 coordinator, Rebecca Davis, for her outstanding work in helping to secure grants to offset costs for stormwater improvement in Lower Allen Township. Ms. Davis's work will save Lower Allen taxpayers a great deal of money, and that is wonderful news. I also want to thank our Congressman, Scott Perry, for his efforts to help secure these grants for our residents. Second, Mr. President, I'd like to commend our emergency medical services team for their efforts. Our EMS team periodically provides services free of charge at the Capital City Mall, including blood pressure checks. While conducting blood pressure checks one day, 2 of our EMTs, Jackie Doherty and Amy Nye, asked a gentleman they were assisting if he had AFib. The man responded that he did not, but checked with his primary care physician about it. They found some occlusions in one of his coronary arteries, and he went to the cath lab to get a stent. The man and his wife extended their thanks to our EMTs for their concern, since they may not have noticed it until it was too late. Thanks to EMT Doherty and EMT Nye, the man and his wife continued to walk the mall together. These are the kinds of positive impacts that we can have in the community, and I'm so proud of the outstanding job that our EMS team is doing. And I just want to thank Captain Deven for his leadership there. Our EMS team also does an incredible job with its work at the State Correctional Institution at Camp Hill. Recent events across the state, however, have highlighted glaring safety concerns for corrections officers and emergency services providers as well. First, there's a long list of tragic and preventable assaults on our corrections officers. Many of our residents serve as staff or corrections officers at SCI Camp Hill. These courageous men and women deserve better than their current exposure to grave injury within state prisons. One of my top priorities is safety. Safety for our residents and safety for our first responders. Our EMS personnel are called to SCI Camp Hill more than 100 times each year for medical emergencies. Our emergency responders are exposed to similar dangers within prison walls with no means to protect themselves. The safety of our first responders must always be a top priority, as well as the safety of our corrections officers. This includes ensuring the application of best safety measures at SCI Camp Hill, and it's vital that we work collaboratively with state officials and listen to our corrections officers' concerns so that our COs and our first responders may return home safely to their families each and every night. Thank you, Mr. President, and with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Shin.
I just want to thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership in this very active meeting tonight. I have nothing else.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President Black.
I attended the Cumberland County Public Safety Orientation for Elected Officials on Saturday. It was a very well-done presentation, and to make a long story very short, they admitted that they need the local municipalities because the only real thing that they have is a 911 center, but in case of an emergency where they need equipment or manpower or womanpower, they need the local municipalities. And that was at the end of a 3.5-hour session that came out. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Holtzman.
First, Tom, I apologize for the Snyder month that I'm called for. And, other than that,
Thank you, Solicitor. Director Hall.
I have nothing to
Do
say.
you have a PowerPoint for us?
I'll hold.
We're good. How's the voice? Nothing? I would just like to say, Rebecca Davis, our MS4 coordinator, she is fantastic and really knows her stuff. I took the opportunity for our church. They had asked me back when they had to apply for the permit, or apply for the credit for the BMP. And they, back a while back, and I helped walk them through, so it was an educational experience for me, and she was great then. And then they had also then received last month an inspection notice that has to be self-inspected and that. And looking at it, you know, I made some suggestions to her, maybe, again, putting it in layman's terms a little more for some of the people that are going to try to self-inspect. But other than that, I went through and did the inspection myself and came in and fully expecting for her to send me back with some homework and do it again, and I got it right. So, and I went through, and so I understand now both the difference between, you know, the new part of the building that the church added and the old part and why it's different and the way it doesn't go into the ground. The downspouts can sheet out, I guess. But it was a great experience, so I would recommend anybody who has any question of BMPs and all of that, just go take a walk at by one with an inspection sheet. And I think that you'll give yourself quite an education. So that was very helpful. But she spent a lot of time with me on it, just explaining things, and she really knows her stuff. So Other than that, I would like to thank everybody for a good, productive meeting, and I hope that we can leave here and come back to get more stuff done for the township. Meeting adjourned.